Another day of winter meetings in the books. We have a MLB lottery, draft lottery to go over. We have Rule 5 draft prep to talk about. We have some Scott Harris quotes. Still not a lot of moves really across baseball. We'll talk about it all today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Thursday. Nope, it's Wednesday, December 6th, 2023. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Be sure to check out the SiriusXM app as well. You can just search any team, and if they're playing a game, you can get their home radio broadcast anytime, anywhere, straight to the app. It's an awesome feature and an awesome app, the SiriusXM app. Now that we know it's Wednesday and not Thursday, I'm so used to, because I do this a day in advance, I'm so used to looking at the date as I'm doing my open there and just adding a day. It's really kind of messed me up, like in all aspects of life. I continuously, I look at the date and I add a day now because I do it literally every single day and I'm just so used to it. So I'm recording this after midnight, saw December 6th on there and assumed that it was the 7th, but it is not. So welcome back, everybody. Hope you're having a fantastic week so far. It has been extremely quiet on the winter meetings front as it comes to a close. The Rule 5 draft, which will be Wednesday afternoon, is always one of the last things that happens in winter meetings. And there will still be some like stragglers and some leftovers there on Thursday. But by Thursday and by really Wednesday night, most of it's going to be over. And again, there's always, I remember a couple of years ago, there was like, these, I forget what trade it was, but like these two teams aren't leaving until the deal is done. And they left like Thursday afternoon or something. Like there's always some drama that happens at the end, but I probably shouldn't say always drama because I'm always really excited for this week. And this has been a quiet winter meetings. And I think a lot of that has to do with just the fact that everybody and their mother is waiting for Shohei Ohtani to sign. And I'm not trying to rush the dude. I'm not saying like he needs to sign. This is ridiculous that he's waiting. No, I mean, what he's got to do what's best for him and his camp and his agent and whatnot. Like they're going to take their time and find the best deal possible. But it is directly affecting the speed of pretty much everybody else. And we've seen a couple of trades. We saw, obviously, on Sunday night, was it? I believe we saw the Mariners trade, right, with the Braves. That happened while I was recording this show. That's always funny. And then we also, on Tuesday night, last night, we saw the Verdugo trade. Not too often do the Yankees and Red Sox involve themselves in trades. It's been like 10 years since they've had one. I think Drew was actually the last. Somebody tweeted it out, was the last like prominent trade that happened between those two clubs. So there's been some moves, but it certainly has not been this high flying, oh my goodness, moves happening left and right thing that it is some years. And I think that a lot of that just has to do with when there's such a prominent market setter. That's what Shohei Ohtani is. He is a market setter. He will determine the market for the next wave of free agents below him, right? The Matt Chapmans of the world. And like Matt Chapman's obviously not even the same stratosphere as Shohei Ohtani, but like this is a weak offensive free agent class. He's going to want to see what the market is for the best player on the market before he determines how much he's worth, and so forth. And then trickle down effect happens. And that's when you get a lot of moves. So I think that this year is a year where the winter meetings is obviously quiet. It's obviously a little sad just because I look forward to it so much, but and I feel like I kind of played into the hype of it. Definitely, probably played into the hype of it just because I do get so excited. And then there wasn't a whole lot of action, but I do think that it's a lot of of that. It's a lot of, the biggest names those dominoes have to fall before the market is determined for everybody else. So once those dominoes do fall, that's when you can expect kind of a slew of moves to happen, probably in pretty short order. And that'll be a fun time. But I don't think that it'll be this week, unfortunately. Still a day left. We'll see what Wednesday and Thursday morning probably-ish hold. But it has certainly been a slow winter meetings up to this point. Something that did happen on Tuesday was the Major League Baseball Draft Lottery was held. The Tigers will pick 11th. I think they technically moved back one. Sure, it is what it is. This is a pretty deep draft class. At least that's again, I said it yesterday. I'll say it again. That is the opinion right now. You cannot, if you've been doing this for any amount of time, whether it's 1 year or 5 years or 30 years or 50 years, I don't care. You very quickly realize that you cannot determine how good a draft class is going to be in December before the draft. We still have literally start to finish, like players reporting, like preseason ball. We have start to finish an entire season. So there is so much that still, you know what I mean? Like there are dudes that had like okay junior years of high school that are going to be first round picks next year and aren't even on radars right now, and vice versa. There's people. There's been plenty of examples over the last couple of years of prominent players. There was, what was his name? Florida Gators, Judd Fabian. He was like projected to be a top 3 pick during winter meetings the year before his draft year, his first draft year, his junior year. And then he struck out a billion times in the season and plummeted so much so that he went back for his senior year, right? Like you can't possibly determine how talented a draft class is going to be. But for whatever it's worth to you, the general consensus is that this is going to be a deeper draft. Maybe not the most top-heavy draft ever, although there are some really talented baseball players from Florida that are set to be up there. We'll talk about those as we get much, much closer to draft season. This should be on paper. Okay, it's not my fault if it's not. You've been warned, but this should be on paper a draft class where you can still get a good player there in the middle of the first round. Okay. Really only noteworthy stuff that happened there was that Oakland fell out of the top 3. I love it. Maybe that's a hot take. I feel so bad for the Oakland Athletics fan base, unbelievably bad, and I want to hug all of them. Okay, genuinely, I've no ill will toward the fans. That's not why I say that. I say that because I want nothing good to happen to this ownership group. And I think that basically giving them the finger and saying, yeah, like you're intentionally losing. Well, guess what? You're not even getting a top 3 pick 2 years in a row. Have fun with your little move to Vegas. That put a smile on my face. Also, always going to put a smile on my face when the Royals drop. To be honest, that is 10 times out of 10 every day of the week and twice on Sunday. I'm gonna be pleased to see the Royals drop and to see. I mean, I don't even have to be happy with any misfortune that happens with the Royals. At some point, you got to feel bad. They are in complete disarray. That organization is also just stuck at the bottom. Prospects falling flat on their face over and over. Not including Bobby Witt Jr. But I mean, golly, they are just struggling as well. So seeing them fall certainly was noteworthy as well. And then maybe one of the Tigers' biggest rivals, maybe their biggest. I don't know. Everybody has a different opinion on who the bona fide biggest is. But the Cleveland Guardians, with only a 2% chance to have the number 1 overall pick, land the number 1 overall pick in the draft in 2024. So that is obviously noteworthy, being that the Guardians are still a pretty good team and now have the number 1 overall pick. So that'll be something that the Tigers obviously have to deal with that will directly affect them. But your Detroit Tigers will pick 11. As we always do, we will have a ton of draft coverage next summer as we actually get closer to college and high school games being played. I'm not breaking down the draft in December. Okay. Let's keep the ball rolling here. We got some Scott Harris quotes. He was caught by the media for a little bit. Then we have Rule 5 draft prep. We got some names to throw out you, some names to watch, maybe some names the Tigers might have interest in. And then we'll just talk about the Rule 5 in general. Do the Tigers even make a pick this year? Should they make a pick this year? We'll discuss all of that and more right after I tell y'all about our friends over at Jase Medical. We talk about Jase all the time here because whether you're on extended travel, bracing for a major weather event, or limited by yet another supply shortage, you are covered, my friend, thanks to our partners at Jase Medical. Life-saving antibiotics and a long list of daily medications can be ordered in 1 year supply, even ED generics for Cialis or Viagra. Jase Medical has the Jase Case. The Jase Case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinus infections, skin infections, amongst many others. This stuff could happen to any of us. So visit jasemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by an on-board certified physician, and your medication will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than it is today. So go to jasemedical.com and use offer code LOCKEDON, all one word, to get $20 off of your order. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2 of Locked On Tigers. I appreciate y'all for tuning in, as always, making us your first listen every single day. We'll be back tomorrow, recapping winter meetings. Hopefully some stuff happens here on the final day. Don't want to be all doom and gloom like I was earlier. There's still a whole day, day and a half, 2 days, depending on who you ask, left. We'll see if anything happens, but certainly has been a very, very slow start to the week, but we will still be here tomorrow and Friday. Tomorrow and Friday. I keep thinking I'm a day off. I thought tomorrow was Friday. Anyway, let's keep the ball rolling here. We talked about the lottery. Let's talk about some Scott Harris quotes. Nothing like earth-shattering, but he was caught by the media, and he was asked about a few different things. Spencer Turnbull, he was asked about, I'm done with that situation. He basically just said, like, yeah, we wanted to part ways. He talked about Austin Meadows. We've talked about that at length. This is probably one of the last times that it will be brought up to him, I would imagine, going forward. He kind of did hint at with that. He kind of did hint at, like, if Austin feels like he's ready to play baseball again, like, we may open the door and have that conversation again. But it does not sound like that is even close to happening. And it sounds like there's even questions whether Austin Meadows is going to play baseball for anyone ever again. So he and Harris said, the priority is with him and his mental health and his family and everything. So it didn't even seem like really a big decision for either party. Kind of just sounded like that was always what was going to happen. The big quote, though, the interesting quote here is what he was asked about. This is AJ Hinch also was asked about Colt Keith and Justyn-Henry Malloy. Harris's quote for Justyn-Henry Malloy and Colt Keith was, quote, they need to come to camp and earn a spot on the team, basically not guaranteeing spots on the opening day roster. And when AJ Hinch was asked about it, he said, I am excited to see them with all of this attention on them. It's one thing to be on a prospect list. It's another to be a featured part of a competition trying to make a major league roster for the first time. Both of these kind of hint at nothing is given, but if they earn it, they earn it. And it was actually, I wonder if I can give credit here and find it really quickly. There was, this is at Doe Jumars on Twitter, obviously just replacing the D in the J in Joe Dumars. He says this, but if their competition is McKinstry, Vierling, and Ibanez, they're basically being handed jobs. I don't think it's that dramatic of like it is, you know what I mean? Like it's just simply they're being handed the job. But that is a good point. Like if it's you can say all you want, like, oh, they need to compete, they need to earn a spot. even if you're not a believer in Colt Keith, I find it very hard to believe that too many people out there are looking around and thinking about the 2024 Tigers, and they're like, well, like Zach McKinstry might just be a better option in 2024 at second base than Colt Keith. I don't think there's too many people out there. I don't think they believe that there's a better option at second base either. Now, if Colt Keith, excuse me, if Colt Keith comes in to camp and is just, he bats 080, then like, okay, we have a different conversation here. Absolutely. But I think really at the end of the day, I don't see any way in which Colt Keith is not the primary second baseman for this baseball team next year. Now, completely different conversation with Justyn-Henry Malloy. We talked about it earlier in the offseason. We will talk about it much, much more when spring rolls around. I'll be completely honest with y'all. I struggle to find consistent playing time for Justyn-Henry Malloy early on in the season. Now, obviously, if an injury happens, then you're going to have space, and he's going to be one of the first guys called up. His bat is clearly too good for AAA. Whether he's ready for the majors, that's only something that you have to prove, but it is certainly too good for any level of the minors. So like that, I'm not trying to say he's not ready in the batter's box. All I'm saying is he's not going to play third base. He will not. He has struggled defensively at third base in the minors. They're not about to throw him consistently at third base in the majors. Okay. That's not going to happen. And you already have a plethora, an abundance, a lot of corner outfielders, and all of them better defenders than Justyn-Henry Malloy. And you're not going to have somebody get called up just to DH. That is not going to happen. So, legitimately, that's one where I want him up here more than anybody. I wanted him up here in August. But when game planning about where he finds himself on the roster, I think it's a lot more difficult than maybe people are realizing in December. I'm not saying it's impossible. A lot of stuff is going to change from December to March. A lot of stuff. There's still some trades that are going to happen. We talk about the fact that there's probably going to be some corner outfielders traded specifically. That there's plenty of room for him to still find a spot. But on December 6th, if the season started tomorrow, I don't think he'd be on the Major League roster. So that's something we'll have to keep an eye on. But I thought those quotes were interesting in regards to that. Let's talk about the Rule 5 draft. The Rule 5 draft is Wednesday afternoon, I believe at 2 p.m. Eastern time, but double check that as well. And yeah, the Rule 5 draft is always very interesting. It's a fantastic opportunity for players. I think it's a really, really good rule. And that's not to say it has a super high success rate. We'll get into that in a second. But I do think that it's a great way to incentivize teams to add players to their 40-man roster, to make sure that teams aren't just hoarding a bunch of, borderline MLB ready prospects. I really do enjoy the Rule 5 draft and the fact that it is implemented. I think it's a fantastic idea, and it's executed very well. I need to start off this whole conversation by saying this. The Rule 5 draft, I just sung its praises. It's a fantastic, brilliant idea. The brainchild behind the Rule 5 draft deserves $1 billion. The Rule 5 draft has a very, very, very low success rate. And when I say success rate, I mean finding someone who you are comfortable not only staying on the Major League roster for the remainder of the season you take them in, because that is the rule. They have to stay the entire season on your Major League roster, but also then this dude is a player, we want him even going forward past that, because there's no point in holding on to him for the entire season if you're just going to get rid of him the very next year anyway, right? That's not a super high success rate. Okay, maybe I was too dramatic. It's not 1%, okay? But it's certainly not super high. Okay, you're not talking about 70-80% either. And so it's important that when we look at these prospects, there is a reason that after 5 years of minor league baseball, they are not on a 40-man roster, right? If they were a solidified, like really good, guaranteed, this guy can be an impact player at the major league level, they'd be on a 40-man, right? There's 14 spots of non-major league room on a 40-man roster. And so I think that's always just like important to remember. And we're Tigers fans, so we're like relatively familiar with the Rule 5 at this point. Al Avila's favorite day of the year was the Rule 5 draft. My goodness, that was his Christmas morning. I don't think I've ever seen anyone get as excited about anything than Al Avila was for the Rule 5 draft every year. He circled it on his calendar. He threw a party the night before. He invited all of his friends. It was a national holiday to this dude. He wanted to petition it to get like kids the day off school for it. I've never seen anyone love anything really as much as Al Avila loved the Rule 5 draft. And we have a different regime now. So I'll be very interested in seeing the Tigers are picking later this year than they did last year because the team was better this year, obviously, than it was last year. And so picking outside of the top 10 or top 9, I'm really interested in the strategy and if they pick someone at all. We'll talk about all of that. I'll throw out some names as well. We'll talk about all that right after this. All right, everybody. Welcome back. Third and final segment here, Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in. So we're talking about the Rule 5 draft. And for me, I've gone back and forth on it a lot. I want to start off by saying that the most common thing and the safest route, that doesn't even feel like the right terminology. I don't want to say safest route. Scratch that from the record. I think that the most likely occurrence for teams that are going to pick someone is you take a pitcher. And that's because we've talked about it a lot. You can always develop somebody in the bullpen. Always. And there's more relievers than any other position on a baseball field. Objectively, always, right? So if you want to take a chance on an arm, you have room to do that by putting them in your bullpen. So that's always a possibility. And again, we'll talk about some pitchers here in a second to maybe keep an eye out for. And so there's always a possibility of that. Okay. The Tigers could just go into tomorrow, take a flamethrower that's not on a 40-man roster and see if they can turn him into anything. Right. I think I'll tell you what we shouldn't do. We certainly should not be going into the Rule 5 draft going, you know what? We can solve third base through the Rule 5 draft. Please no. Okay. And that's not to say I have a couple of names on here of some dudes that play third base. Okay. That's not to say that they can't get someone that is going to log time at third or that is going to be like a utility type and will probably play all over the diamond, third base included. But if your game plan for the last 3 weeks on how to address starting third base has been just get me to the Rule 5 draft, if that ever became public information, I would lose it. I would lose it. That is absolutely not what competitive Major League Baseball teams do with starting offensive positions. Okay, so I want to get that out of the way here as well. I do think there's an argument for not taking anybody. And the reason why is, A, you're at 38 players, so you have the room, obviously. You're at 38 players on your 40-man currently. So you have a little bit of a cushion there. You could take someone, but you also shouldn't be done adding major league free agents or, if it happens that way, you shouldn't be done adding major league talent to your roster. And so if you want to keep everybody you currently have on your 40-man roster, if you want to keep all 38 of those gentlemen, then and you still want to add other players this offseason, then guess what? You're not taking anybody. That 40-man roster spot, those two 40-man roster spots, are the most valuable they have been to the Tigers organization in a long time because the team hasn't been good in a long time. And it's been so easy to just be like, well, I'll just throw anybody out there. We'll see if they maybe can like get lightning in a bottle, whatever. So I do think that there is a really legitimate chance that nobody is taken. And all of this conversation is just null. And the Tigers are going to look towards actual major league caliber players to fill those last two spots on the 40-man. Also, there's still, all that being said, there is still plenty of players to like shed. If you wanted to add players in the offseason and take somebody in the Rule 5 on Wednesday, you could find a pretty easy way to do that. This is not like these 38 guys we need to keep together no matter what because they're going to win a World Series together. Okay, there's still plenty of fat to be trimmed here. So I again, it goes both ways. I go back and forth a little bit on it. But it would not be the most shocking thing in the world to me, especially without like a premier, like top 5, top 7 pick in this Rule 5 draft, if the Tigers just passed and didn't take anybody and wanted to use those roster spots on a more proven commodity. Now, if they don't, and they do decide to take someone, I have a horrible track record with accurately trying to predict who the Tigers will take in the Rule 5. And like everybody does. It's the most just close your eyes and throw a dart at a board event in all of baseball because there are like hundreds of players who are eligible for this thing. Like hundreds. And you can't possibly wrap your head around and like go in depth on every single one that is eligible. And there are so many that are just like, obviously, no, this dude is, 25 and hitting a $190 in high single A. Obviously, we're not about to take him, right? That's what like 90% of them are. Probably even higher. That's probably like what 93 to 95% of them are. Then there's the top end that like, oh, they could maybe be on a major league roster, but then you have to find a team that also has space on their 40-man and also fills a positional need, et cetera, et cetera. And at the end of the day, you get like 8 to 12 teams usually every year that are taking people in the Rule 5 draft. Some names that jump out at me. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 names. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them are pitchers. Okay. The first one I want to bring up is Coleman Crow, who's a right-handed pitcher in the Mets organization, was a part of a trade with the Angels and Mets. He is interesting because he is going to miss all of 2024 recovering from Tommy John, but did really well as a professional, drafted in 2019, I believe, did really well as a professional before the Tommy John. And the interesting thing with him is you can keep them on your IL, but that does not count towards like, oh, you kept him on your major league roster all year, which is the rule with the Rule 5 draft. Anybody taken on this has to stay on your major league roster for the entire 2024 season. The rule for him would be he would have to spend, I believe it's half of the 2025 season on your roster. So he'd be on the injured list all of 2024, and then at least half of the season to match the Rule 5 requirements, he would have to be on your roster in 2025. Could be someone they take a shot in the dark on. That is someone to keep an eye on. Tanner Burns from the Cleveland Guardians organization is the only reason why he's like not like the bona fide number one, like you must go get this guy in this list, is because I don't think he's going to make it to the Tigers pick. I am unbelievably confident this dude is going to get taken probably pretty high. And again, the Rule 5 draft is a complete bleep show. Like I could be totally wrong, but this dude has been really good forever. He was really good in college. I think he was a first-round pick, if memory serves me correct. Like this guy's always been good. But the Cleveland Guardians are a pitching factory. I talk about it all the time on this show, how much I envy their pitching development. And so they legitimately just don't have room for this like low 3, mid 3 ERA minor league pitcher that's like not that old and was a first round pick. So I think that he's a guy to keep an eye out for. He also, I think if you moved him to the pen, could really top out velo wise. I think he could hit upper 90s if you moved him to the bullpen. Something to keep an eye out for, but I would be pretty surprised, to be honest, if he made it to the Tigers pick. Next one, Asa Lacy is probably the biggest name on here for all people that do follow the MLB draft. Asa Lacy was, oh my goodness, was he the Torkelson draft? He was he was out of Texas A&M. He was such a good pitcher in college. I loved watching him pitch. Big guy, lefty. Everybody really liked him and was a very high draft pick for the Kansas City Royals. Did he go 3 overall? He was a very high pick. And I just can't remember if it was the Torque one or was it Riley Green? Might have been the year before. Regardless, very good pitcher in college. And as a pro has just been unbelievably ineffective and has just really struggled. It's honestly been kind of sad and like really unfortunate. He is not being protected. I don't think it's a guarantee he's taken, but he's still relatively young and he is a lefty. And at one point, he was one of the best pitching prospects in literally the entire game of baseball, but he has been struggled so mightily. I'm talking like ERAs in the 7s and 9s, like that mightily, that he's unprotected. And so just out of like namesake, we're going to talk about him, but I don't even know if a team's going to take a chance on him, unfortunately. That's just how much he's kind of fallen off. Pitchers, Justin Slayton, another pitcher that I think out of the bullpen could have some really nice velocity to him, some pretty decent strikeout numbers there as well. All the guys I've mentioned outside of Lacy so far have been righties, which leads me to my last pitcher, Juan Sanchez from the San Francisco Giants, is a lefty. And he's also only 23 years old, which usually, you have to play 5 years of minor league ball before you're here. Like usually the guys are a little bit older, so he's younger and a lefty. This is someone that Foolish Bailey did a great like Rule 5 rundown as he does every year. This is a guy that he was a really kind of like under the radar, kind of a big fan of. Be sure to go check out that video if you want much more in-depth analysis on like 20 guys I think he talks about in total that it could all get taken. It's a very, very interesting watch. But yeah, Sanchez is definitely a guy that just because of the youth and the lefty, and you can put him in the bullpen, that a team might take a chance on him, but is kind of just like unproven. Doesn't really have like the high-end stuff in the minors. So something to keep an eye out for there as well. And I think that's all the pitchers. So then that leaves us with the 2 hitters that are kind of on my radar. One is Devin Mann, also from the Kansas City Royals. He plays all over the infield and like hit pretty well in the minors. And the Royals, for whatever reason, just aren't protecting him. There was it's interesting. He was a part of a trade. He came from the Dodgers, and there's just he struggled in the second half, did really well in the first half of the year, and that was enough for the Royals to not. The reason why I'm like clearly flustered here is just because like the Royals, I don't understand them. Like you're not good enough to like be super nitpicky about like the young talent you have. But B, like you traded for him. What are you doing? You trade like I understand he hit under 200 for the Royals minor league system in the half a season he played for them this year. He was part of a trade. You wanted to acquire him. And now you're leaving him unprotected because of like a month and a half of bad hitting, despite the last 2.5 years he was a good hitter. They never fail to amaze me. I'm so glad I can actively root against them. So I think that he's going to be someone that's on a few people's radars, plays all over the infield, third base included. And then the other one that I think is a little more under the radar is Anthony Prado. He plays everywhere in the infield except first base. And the only reason I put him on there is he has positional versatility and he has high on base percentage numbers. Like we're talking like 400, around 400, depending on like what stint you look at in the minor leagues. So he's a guy that would not be the most shocking thing in the world if they wanted to add another utility type of player. I think it's important to know when I was going through the people that I wanted to add on this list, and then I'll let you get with your Wednesday here. I eliminated all outfielders. I would be absolutely stunned if the Tigers drafted an outfielder in the Rule 5. We have too many outfielders as is. We right, like that is, we are not in the business of adding especially unproven outfielders to this roster. I can't fathom them doing that. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Whoever they take, we'll talk about it tomorrow. There's also a minor league portion to the Rule 5, just for like lower levels of the minor leagues guys getting a chance in like AAA. So we'll talk about if the Tigers do anything there. I go back and forth on it. I don't think it's a guarantee, because there is certainly, you're later in the draft. You're not getting like one of the bona fide like top guys here. That's just like the slam dunks. You still have room in your bullpen though. You absolutely could add an arm there, but I don't think it's a guarantee. But also, like, this is kind of where Scott Harris made his mark, not in the Rule 5. Mason Englert was not very effective for the Tigers last year, but this is like, he has really made his mark with like these kind of like trying to find the between the margin type of players. And this is an opportunity to do that. So we will see. My money is on, they just take a pitcher. But they do take somebody. That's where my money's on. But we will see. Wouldn't shock me at all if they skipped the pick. Honestly, I'd be pretty cool with that. That would tell me that they are still trying to go out there and find more major league talent to add. So I'd be pretty okay with that, all things considered. Okay, so those are some names to look out for. Now, again, they'll probably take some dude that nobody has ever heard of. We'll have to do a complete breakdown on him tomorrow. We'll do a breakdown on whoever they take tomorrow. But like Akil Baddoo was like completely out of left field. Nobody thought he was going to get taken by anybody. The Tigers took him like 4th overall, whatever. Like, that's probably what's going to happen tomorrow. And we'll be here for it. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will be back tomorrow as always. Appreciate you all greatly. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. I'll catch you all then, baby. Go Tigers.